I think the 12 HP is going to be fine. I'm probably gonna lose some matchups because of it, but it will happen. So okay, 36-65. No turning back. Hey, what's good everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In this episode of Player POV, I'll be going over my run earlier in the season in Masters Classic, where I'll be talking about how I read team compositions when I have very little knowledge about the metagame. So you might be wondering why I picked Master Classic this season instead of the Love Cup, and the answer was pretty simple for me. I simply wasn't interested in that format. It was our third theme cup from Niantic, including the Halloween Cup and the Holiday Cup, where it would feature potential double charmer or even triple charmer lines, and I really wasn't interested in fighting against Wigglytuff and Clefable, Alolan Ninetales, especially after this new update. So I decided to give Master Classic a shot, and as you can see from the introduction, I powered up my first ever legendary Pokemon to level 40, a 15-15-12 Giratina Origin, and I wanted to really have a team that was built around that. So before diving into Master Classic, I decided to do some research, and you can see here on the screen some fellow content creators. Big thank you to Tommy Love TV, Elodie Colo, and of course Oxford U, which you can find here on YouTube. The other two content creators are going to be on Twitch, and you can find their links in the description below. So before we get into the battles, I do want to talk a little bit about what I've learned or what my first impressions of Master Classic was, and without a doubt it's definitely a very positive one, and it's cleared up some of the misconceptions that I might have had or some other trainers might have had. So about the meta dynamics, I used to think that Dialga was kind of the king of everything and it was unbeatable, and everyone had to have, you know, 2 hard counters to it or their own Dialga. But I actually found out that wasn't really the case. It seems like the Master Classic metagame is quite balanced right now. There's a lot of answers to Dialga, there's a lot of complementary pairs to Dialga, and all of those seem to go in this very healthy cycle. I find it weird that I'm even saying that, but after playing all of my matches, I played about 30 on stream to start with, and I played about another 30 offline. I found that all the teams that I ran into, yes, you do see some of the same Pokemon again, but they always have different configurations or they have different roles within their team. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go into the 8 battles that I've selected from that set of 30 on my stream. And about the misconceptions of it being an inaccessible format. In this team that I have that I'm going to show here, I actually have 2 Pokemon that I originally had powered up for Master Premier. So knowing that in Season 7 we aren't going to have Master Premier anymore, these 2 Pokemon actually have a very good role in Master Classic, and that's going to be Excadrill and Dragonite. So the only investment I actually had to make was just to power up my Giratina, and I would be ready to kind of compete in Masters. So the one disclaimer is that because I was testing a lot of weird stuff after hitting Legend, including trying to make Leomani work in Open Ultra League, after a couple sets in Love Cup, I really dropped down to the 2600s. So these battles that I'm about to showcase actually took place between the 2600s and the 2800s, and then offline I was able to get to 2890 or so by the end of Master Classic. So just a little bit of context there so that you know what I was working with and who I was playing against. So let's get into the lineup. So the team that I'm running is Excadrill lead with Giratina Origin safe swap and Dragonite in the back. As a side note, Dragonite is probably not the greatest best buddy choice for this team. It's very likely to be Giratina Origin because it'll allow you to win CMP over other Giratina Origins, and I think that's going to be the most valuable attribute for this team. The other 2 Pokemon they don't get too many benefits in Master Classic with the level 41 boost, but you'll definitely get more mileage out of Giratina Origin. And the theory behind the line is very simple. It's a team comp that we see all the time across GBL. It's the ABB line, a double dragon back line with a steel lead. And the whole idea is that as long as you're using Giratina Origin to first draw out the best dragon counter, which is very likely to be a Togekiss or a Dialga, you can take that down with Excadrill, bring more energy into the next matchup, and then potentially have better matchups for Dragonite in the back. I chose Excadrill here mainly because I had seen a Japanese trainer before in the first split of Master Classic reach Legend with Melmetal with Double Dragon in the back, and because I don't have a good Meltan despite grinding all these Meltan boxes, I decided not to invest in an inferior one and instead invest in the Drillbur that I had saved for Master Premier. As you know, RIP Master Premier, it's not going to be available in Season 7, so I might as well put it to good use, and it recently got that Mudshot buff, so I really think that Excadrill is a really good and underutilized choice in Master Classic right now. So getting into a high-level view of how I had planned to play out my first matches in Master Classic, the main thing is because I don't know the meta very well, I can only make educated guesses. And what I will do is I will take a look at the lead scenario, and if I were to win or lose that lead, I'm going to decide in those opening seconds of the match what Pokemon they might potentially have in the back and what pairs well. And based off that information, I will move accordingly. So the biggest thing for me is to try to get the reads right at the beginning. And thankfully for me, I found that most of the leads that I encountered, you started to see the same Pokemon over and over again, right? I saw a lot of Dialga leads, a lot of Melmetal leads, a lot of Togekiss, and a lot of Giratina Origin. Most of the time, it was one of those 4 Pokemon. So after a while, I started getting used to not only the secondary matchups, but also what compositions I can expect in the back. So there are 8 matches total. I do lose some of them as well, and I'll talk about the mistakes that I made in getting the reads there. Yeah, so let's go get into it. Okay, so getting into the battles here, we'll start off with some more favorable leads, and we'll kind of move through the different lead scenarios. And in this match, I get a very favorable lead of Excadrill into Dialga. So this is basically the dream lead for this team composition. You cannot have Dialga going up against Giratina Origin, and you cannot have Dialga going up against Dragonite. So for me, in my case, I'm a Steel type lead looking to defeat Dialga with 2 Pokemon weak to Dialga in the back. And for our opponent here, if you're kind of flipping this scenario around, if you're a Dialga, you're afraid generally of 3 Pokemon, hopefully 4 after this match in case he hasn't seen Excadrill before, but you're generally going to be pretty nervous about a Melmetal lead, a Groudon lead, or a Togekiss lead. So in this particular case, what I'm kind of thinking of is he's very likely to have counters to those Pokemon in the back. And the good thing is, because I have won the lead by a very significant margin, I can react accordingly with my Dragons and try to deduce what Pokemon he has left. So I'm going to wait for my opponent to swap out here, and I'm just going to build energy here. I'm not going to throw. And the main reason I don't throw here on the 5th mud shot here is because if I throw and my opponent swaps out and I'm in an energy deficit, I don't know if I can secure that switch advantage just yet. So I'm going to keep farming, and my opponent is eventually going to swap out here, and he brings in that Giratina Origin form. So had that been another Pokemon that I wasn't sure if I was going to win switch against, I actually would have thrown a draw run there to make sure I chip it enough so that I could secure that alignment down the road. So here, Giratina Origin comes in. Pretty simple switch in here. I'm not going to bring in my own Giratina Origin because I don't want to face another Giratina Origin with an energy advantage. And I'm definitely going to bring in my Dragonite here. My Dragonite has a very dominating matchup against Giratina Origin, but as I'm swapping it in, and I'm going to get a little bit of energy advantage here. I'm just going to Dragon Breath down here. So I pretty much know this matchup after playing it a lot is that if you can land a Dragon Claw, especially before they fire their first charge move, if you can land a Dragon Claw and they don't shield it, you can tank any move on Giratina Origin and farm down, as long as you swap out fast enough. So as I'm charging up these Dragon Breaths, I'm actually thinking about what he might have in the back. So here in this case, if you're a Dialga lead and you have a Giratina Origin in your backline, that is one of the biggest counters to Melmetal. So if you have your Melmetal coverage right there, then you have to have a Togekiss cover in the back somewhere. So in my mind right now, there's very likely to be some kind of Togekiss wall, maybe a Kyogre, maybe a Melmetal of some type in the back, kind of waiting for that remaining matchup. And this is fantastic because I'm definitely going to win switch here if I don't misplay, and my Giratina Origin is going to have a much better matchup against whatever that Pokemon is in the back. So let's see the anticipation here. Throw my Dragon Claw here, and I'm not expecting a shield. Opponent doesn't shield. We actually see MP right there, so I try to throw on the 7th Shadow Claw coming in. And I'm going to take this no matter what, because if it is a Shadow Ball, great, it doesn't KO me. I can Dragon Breath the rest of the way down. If it is an Ominous Wind, I believe I actually survive another one, and I can still Dragon Breath down. So in this case, opponent has lost switch advantage, lost alignment, and he's probably going to bring back in his Dialga, or so I'm thinking. So I have about enough bandwidth to get to just that one Dragon Claw, and I'm going to give up a little bit of energy in those Dragon Breaths. So that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to charge up a little bit of energy before I dipped out, just so that I can make up for that deficit down the road. I know that I'm going to at least have to shield one move if the Dialga came back in and I wanted to line up my Excadrill against it. So my opponent makes an interesting play though. Brings in the 3rd Pokemon. So right there, if you can see the pattern right there, right? You have a Dialga, very weak to Groudon, Melmetal, Togekiss. What's the back line? very good against Groudon, Groudon, Melmetal, Togekiss. So it all depends on alignment from my opponent here. There's the Togekiss counter. The Groudon slash Melmetal counter was already eliminated. But here's the thing. I've got the Giratina Origin in the back. So here I'm just going to throw energy. The main reason is, like, I'm probably not going to get to a Hurricane, and I want to deal a little bit of chip damage to this. And if he's going to commit to the Thunder Shock down, that's great. But I'm going to continue to chip this because I really want this Melmetal to get into Shadow Ball range, so I can either start to threaten shields or start to threaten a swap out. So here, this is kind of fantastic because with all that energy that Melmetal tried to gain by farming down my Dragonite, I could just bring a Giratina Origin here and invalidate that energy. And also, because the Melmetal has taken so much Dragon Breath damage over time, I can just go for Ominous Winds straight up, and then I can maintain alignment as long as he decides to bring in that Dialga. So pretty much my opponent tries to swap out, but here's the thing. I've got the double drill run, and the best part about Excadrill is that unlike Melmetal, once you've used your anti-steel charge move, you basically are not debuffed, and as long as you have the energy advantage, you can come in and continue to apply that shield pressure. So my opponent goes for a move here. I actually thought at this point that he might have been at a Draco, and I think that he was, because, well, maybe he was, but I had farmed up some extra energy, so I might have miscalculated. So have to shield there just to be safe. And as you can see here, he is going to have to let the second drill run go because there's no way he can outpace me. That does a lot of damage to Dialga. And Melmetal comes back in with energy. And here, very simple. Melmetal's trying to throw some energy at my Excadrill. I don't need to shield anything because I know that my Giratina Origin already has a dominating matchup. So best case, my opponent superpowers my Excadrill, and then I get to beat down a debuff Melmetal. Or worst case, my opponent decides to bait and he loses the game. So no shield. Takes the Rock Slide, opponent concedes. So that is an example of what the best possible scenario can be for this team. You have perfect alignment, you have dominating matchups in every single position, but you have a good feeling about it because you know that for a Dialga lead, they're generally going to have those types of covers in the back, right? So see a Dialga lead, there's a good chance that in the back line, they're also going to be weak to the dragons you have. So again, maintaining that alignment, very, very important. Okay, so here we have another Dialga lead, and this match is going to show you that just because you have a Dialga lead doesn't mean that you're going to be guaranteed to win the match. So this is a great example of what happens when Excadrill is stretched too thin, and because of its lack of bulkiness, it actually doesn't have that much staying power. Its job really is only to defeat Dialga or a potential Togekiss, but what happens when there's both on the team? So here, my opponent, obviously previously ranked 10, so probably a very experienced player here, just getting a late grind on, and we have a Dialga lead. And my opponent's going to stay in just like the previous opponent, and he's going to swap into a Togekiss. So this is kind of an issue here because I now know that if this Togekiss wanted to take it down to the 2 shield, he could actually just leave my Excadrill with about 20% HP, and that Dialga would have free reign afterwards. So I'm going to throw double Rock Slide here, and I'm thinking about sacrificing my Giratina Origin because when I think about Dialga and what could be in the back with a Togekiss pairing, the first team that I think of is the Kyogre, which is the infamous Lolosox line, just in an inverted order in this particular situation. So in this situation, I think if I can bail out to my Giratina Origin, then I can have my Dragonite be my MVP in the back. So here, I'm going to throw double Rock Slide, and my opponent makes a very skilled play. He sacrifices his Pokemon here to get a little bit of time on the clock, and this is a very smart play. I was not expecting that. I was actually expecting a shield, and then I was going to swap into Giratina Origin form, but because my opponent let this go, and also because I'm in a tricky situation where I can't actually swap out or where I can't actually let this Excadrill go down to maintain switch advantage, I'm in a very bad position. So here, I'm waiting for my third Pokemon to come in, and I'm expecting a Kyogre, right? Because that's kind of what we have in this case. We have a Togekiss to cover enemy Dialgas, and then something needs to cover Melmetal and Groudon, right? So I'm thinking in my head, it absolutely has to be a Kyogre, so as long as I can get my Giratina Origin in, I can align my Dragonite with it later on, but gonna find out that it's actually not, and my opponent brings in a Giratina Origin of his own. So at this point, I'm actually forced to swap into my Giratina Origin. which is a poor situation that I could have probably played out properly, but I did not. And you're going to see my big misplay right here. So I get to 6 Shadow Claws. My opponent had a 1 Shadow Claw lead, and I'm thinking, okay, he charged up to 7. He must be baiting. And I forgot here that my opponent's switch timer is actually already off. So my opponent definitely had Shadow Ball and Veil on his mind, and I do not shield. So because I don't shield, I am now not only at risk of being KO'd. You can see my switch timer is only about a third of the way up. And I'm going to fire the Shadow Ball here. He's obviously going to shield this. And my opponent has reclaimed switch advantage. And there's about a 20 second to 30 second gap in between switch timers right now. So right when I bring in Dragonite, his switch timer is already up. So the best thing that I can do right now is shield this Iron Head, which is pretty awful. And then I'm going to be bringing in my my Excadrill. So I'm going to farm up a little bit more energy, get that Dragon Claw ready, and then I should be able to beat it, but I miscalculate, and I thought I was going to be able to sneak in a couple of extra Dragon Breaths, but he reaches the Iron Head beforehand, so now my opponent's in the best possible position. So he's going to let this go for sure. I try to undercharge. Excadrill's attack is very, very high, and I'm definitely going to get punished here. Great counting by my opponent here, knowing to throw energy before I hit my drill run. And yeah, despite Dragonite coming in and having the Dragon Claw, it's a little bit too late. My opponent has too much energy, and I've basically failed my mission in retaining alignment. Here, my opponent has the move here. It's actually going to be a Shadow Ball. I thought it was an Omnis Wind at the time, so I was hoping to survive. But yeah, really well played in my opponent right there. Definitely a misread on my part. Because I definitely thought that that either backline Pokemon could handle it. What I should have done is I could have gone in with the Dragonite immediately, or I could have gone in with Giratina Origin, but spent some shields to make sure that switch timer was going to be aligned. So that's a situation where just because there's a Dialga lead doesn't mean you always win it, because if my opponent got the right read off and he realized that Togekiss and Dialga both have to be dealt with by Excadrill, then he had a very good shot at winning that game, because he was able to navigate very skillfully around the rest of my Pokemon. So GG's and well played to my opponent right there. Let's get into the next match. Okay, for our third match, we'll have going up against an expert here. We'll be going up against a Dragonite lead. So this is very interesting because my team has a Dragonite, and I already know what Dragonite is potentially covering for and what it could be potentially weak against. So here I have a Steel lead versus a Dragonite, and it's very likely that our positions are going to be swapped here. So when I see Dragonite, very weak to Dialga, very weak to Togekiss, I'm definitely expecting there to be a Melmetal somewhere in this matchup. And then I'm also expecting there to be some kind of countermeasure to, or as a backup to a Dialga counter. So there's probably going to be like a Groudon or something that I'm also expecting in the back here. So in this particular case here, my goal here is to stay in with this Excadrill, because I know this matchup is very dominating. I can actually reach 2 Rock Slides before Dragonite can get to 2 Dragon Claws. So I know that as long as I can stay in and weaken this Dragonite, I'll probably force a swap out and I can react from there. So here, my opponent is going to start off by Dragon Breathing, and I'm just going to charge up energy once again, just like other matchups, and he tries to catch on his Melmetal, and there's the first piece of the puzzle right there. There's the Togekiss counter, there's the Dialga counter. I'm wondering what else could be in the back, and right now my mind is kind of laser focused on there being a potential Groudon or a potential Dialga counter of some type. So here, I'm actually going to throw some energy, because I know that the matchup against Dragonite is going to be pretty dominating anyways, and if I can either force a shield advantage or I can force a health advantage, then my Giratina Origin can come in and potentially either farm down or threaten and build up a lot of energy. So here, I throw both drill runs and my opponent shields them both. So right now, I know that this is my cue to swap into Giratina Origin, bring in that dominating matchup, but build up a lot of energy, be able to threaten whatever's in the back end. I should try to catch a superpower right there, but this is fine. He can dump all of his energy, and Giratina Origin is going to neutralize all of Melmetal's energy, and I'm going to start farming. And my goal is to reach that Shadow Ball, which I hit right now. So at this point, for me, the Melmetal, although it has some energy, it's definitely able to be handled by Dragonite as well. So my opponent's charging up energy here. I can take any amount of Rock Slides that is necessary, and I'm going to threaten an Ominous Wind or a Farm Down. But my opponent's switch timer is already up, and his third Pokemon gets revealed. And now it makes sense, right? This is a Dialga. It's going to be definitely countering other dragons. It's not the counter that I was expecting there to be, but it does make sense in this particular team composition. This is the 2-0 Butters team, just with a flipped order. And here, because of the situation that I'm in right now, I don't necessarily need to win the switch advantage or alignment here. I just know that regardless of what happens here, as long as I get some value out of my Dragonite, this 2-shield Excadrill is going to be an absolute monster. So all I need to do here is be able to make sure that Excadrill is protected, and I'm going to overfarm by quite a bit here. And I actually decide that right here at this moment, because my opponent cannot reach another Iron Head in the time it takes for me to charge up a full drill run, I'm just going to swap in my Dragonite and snipe this this Dialga, which I do. So the main reason that I do this is because I need his Melmetal to come back out, so that I can go and threaten that first, and then I know that the matchup against Dragonite is so dominating that I can double Rock Slide. I have 2 Rock Slides as I leave the Dialga matchup. So all I need to do is make sure this Melmetal comes out. I'm going to do whatever I can from a resource perspective to get it as low as possible and out of the question. And because I think Superpower is definitely going to be more threatening than a Dragon Claw. So I'm actually hoping for the Melmetal to come back in here, but my opponent comes in with Dragonite and then decides to throw a Dragon Claw here, which I'm going to take. And I'm just expecting to Dragon Breath all the way down, which is not a big deal. And he swaps back into Melmetal, and I should have thrown the Dragon Claw here. I actually made a mistake, but he uses the Rock Slide. This is completely fine. This means that I have the shield. I'm going to come in. I'm going to Mush Shot all the way down. He gets the one last move. This cannot be anything but a Superpower. However, once my opponent uses Superpower, I know now that not only is that Dragonite energy dry because all the energy charged up at the beginning of the matchup is now gone, I can just comfortably go for 2 Rock Slides in a row and be able to take the match home. So in this particular match, I did misread the last Pokemon in the situation, but after thinking about it, it does actually kind of make sense because, again, it's one of those, it's a safety Dialga counter in case your Melmetal gets taken out. So this definitely makes a whole lot of sense here from a team composition perspective. And again, my opponent had the same kind of plan that I did, right? I have a Steel with 2 Dragons in the back. He had a Dragon with 2 Steels in the back. So makes complete sense, the direction of his team. So GG's. Okay, so getting into the 4th match, we have a matchup of Excadrill lead versus a Togekiss lead. So before getting into the head-to-head matchup, I've mentioned before that Togekiss actually has a deceptively decent matchup against Excadrill, mainly because Excadrill has very low defense, so those charms are going to be chunking away, and if Togekiss wanted to, it could leave Excadrill with about 20% health in the 2-shield situation. So I'm going to see if my opponent wants to do that. My expectation is that he won't, because this is, for my opponent at least, I'm hoping that he thinks this is a bad matchup and he's going to swap out. So when I see Togekiss is very strong against other dragons and other fighters, and potentially fighters. So if you look at the situation, if it's there to eliminate things that are weak to dragons and for fighters, that means that the covers that it has in the back are potentially going to be weak to those things, right? So I'm definitely thinking that there's going to be a Groudon. Groudon is the one Pokemon that makes the most sense here, because if there were a Melmetal lead, I would definitely expect there to be a Groudon in the back to hard counter that. The other Pokemon that I also thought that it could be potentially afraid of is Kyogre. So Kyogre obviously weak against dragons, unless it can get to a Blizzard. So I'm expecting there to maybe be a Dragonite in the back as well. Dragonite seems to make sense here. Against the Kyogre, has a very solid matchup right there, and we're going to see what happens here. So my opponent, as you notice, is not swapping out, and I'm not sure if he's just trying to get some chunk damage off or trying to make me waste some energy, but my opponent's going to let the first Rock Slide go, and when I get to the second Rock Slide and my opponent still hasn't swapped out, at this point in time, I can confirm that he's ABA weak. So in my head right now, there's a Dragonite in the back that he doesn't want to see, but is still a hard cover for this Togekiss. So here, my opponent decides to shield up the second one, and I am going to take this to the 1 shield. And even if this were a Renation Power, I would still have to shield this because you're going to take a lot of chunk damage from that. So, yep, here I go for the Rock Slide again. And my opponent lets it go. So because my Excadrill is low enough now, I think my opponent thinks that he can bring in a hard counter and start to really pressure it. So my plan here is no matter what is brought in, I'm going to swap to my Giratina Origin form because I already anticipate there being a Groudon in the back, and I think that's what's coming in. So I look at the top right, and as soon as I see the ground type, there's the Groudon confirmed. I swap to my Giratina Origin immediately to draw out the remaining Pokemon. and it's going to be a Dialga. So at this point, the Dialga kind of surprised me, but it does kind of make sense because Dialga's carrying Thunder, can actually do a pretty decent job against Kyogre. I know the versions with Iron Head and Draco, you're not gonna make it in time to get to a Draco before they get to a Blizzard, or I think it's very similar energy there, so it's usually a little bit more of a risky matchup. But I'm expecting this Kyogre or this Dialga to have Thunder for the Kyogre matchup for sure. But either way, I've drawn it out. And my Excadrill has a little bit of energy left from the Togekiss matchup, so no matter what happens in this matchup, I can safely go for the Shadow Ball, and I can safely threaten the Ominous Wind. If he throws his energy, my Excadrill can come in and clean things up. So at this point, I already know that I've won, unless I grossly misplay. So I'm going to go straight for the Shadow Ball here. 7 Shadow Claws gets through before the Iron Head. So opponent takes the Shadow Ball here, and I know that right before I get to the Ominous Wind, he's going to overcharge just a little bit and throw the Iron Head. If in this particular situation, if you're the Giratina Origin, you cannot reach another move. However, he's locked in, so I'm going to go straight for the Drill Run. Probably should have waited that 10 seconds out just to be sure. But my opponent's going to let this go, and as soon as he brings the Groudon, he might get some mud shots of energy, but we've got the hardest Groudon counter potentially in the game. If you guys have seen Altaria versus Diggersby in Great League, this is the exact same matchup. It is absolutely miserable if you're the Groudon. You cannot deal damage with Fire Punch, your Earthquakes are resisted, and this is going to secure us a win here in a very dominating fashion. So I think my opponent actually just lets this go because he knows that he can't win at this point. So we'll entertain him and let this play out. For the record, Dragonite can tank 2 Earthquakes and a Fire Punch and the Mud Shots and have a full Dragon Breath down of the Groudon matchup. So this is a very dominating matchup. My opponent just decides to give up here, and that's going to give us the win. So there, in that situation, is able to correctly read the Groudon as the counter for the Melmetal. The Dialga kind of surprised me a little bit, but in the end, in a retrospect, does kind of make sense because there's only a couple things that the Togekiss is really afraid of, and Dialga can cover those weaknesses. But because my opponent was ABA weak to Excadrill, that was kind of a rough situation for him. Now for another matchup with Togekiss lead in the front, and as you can see, this is later in the night where I've gotten back into playing against Legends, so very good to see. And this time, my opponent makes a different play here and swaps out immediately into the Giratina Origin. So, like I said before, once again, you need to cover for that potential Groudon or potential Melmetal. So here my opponent brings in the Giratina Origin. So I'm guessing that this is the Melmetal counter. So again, there must be an answer to Groudon in the back or potentially an answer to a Kyogre in the back, as I predicted before. And it's a little bit different for this matchup because here I actually have to bring in my my Dragonite into the Giratina Origin. So I'm going to play this a little bit differently down the road, anticipating there to be a potential Groudon. If my Giratina Origin has to face off against it, I actually need to start conserving shields. So opponent brings in the Giratina. I'm going to farm up a couple extra mud shots once again just to get that 2 mud shots in before he throws. And here expecting the Shadow Ball from my opponent, beat me right before I get to that Dragon Claw here, but as long as he takes the damage from this, I should be okay. And opponent's going to throw the Dragon Claw, or throw the Shadow Ball here. I'm going to throw the Dragon Claw, and because my opponent took the damage, I can easily Dragon Breath down. Togekiss comes back in, and I can get a little bit of chip damage off of this Dragon Claw. I actually don't think it's too relevant because I'm going to need 2 Rock Slides to KO anyways. And I'm going to bring back in my Excadrill once again. So in this case, I'm expecting the Groudon to be instantly swapped in. So I'm actually like waiting my switch timer out a little bit because that secondary matchup didn't take very long. And I have some energy built up already from the initial matchup. So I'm just going to go for infinite Rock Slides here. Make sure to throw to fast move denial if I can, and I'm going to chuck a Rock Slide. My opponent's going to shield this. So right here is where there's a little bit of interest because unlike the last opponent where they kind of gave their attentions away a little bit later down the road where they let the first Rock Slide go and then swapped out, here as soon as my opponent shields this, I'm thinking, wow, he must be really desperate, and whatever's in the back must also be weak to Excadrill, because even if I were the Togekiss player here, I don't think it's correct to shield the first Rock Slide because it at least conceals what your third Pokemon is going to be. So right now, I'm thinking that whatever he has in the back has to have a very terrible matchup against Excadrill. So let's see what happens here. I'm gonna throw another Rock Slide, and this time I'm gonna really be able to pressure the shields. And my opponent takes the damage here. And at this point, I'm thinking about swapping to my Giratina Origin, but my opponent throws a charge move. So because I was counting the charms on this Togekiss here, I actually think that he's trying to bait, because there's no reason that you would try to fire a full flamethrower into Excadrill if you're also weak to in the back. I actually call his bait here. And it turns out to be an Ancient Power. So make a great call here, and my opponent swaps out, and his last Pokemon is a Dialga. So actually very similar composition to what we saw last time, except that in this particular case, our opponent's best Melmetal counter turned out to be the Giratina Origin and not the Groudon. So opponent's going to come in with Dialga. You can see here it's a 2-to-1 shield situation. My opponent is not going to reach an Iron Head in time, and this is a showcase of the damage that Excadrill can actually do. So despite me going way into the red here, gonna fire off these back-to-back draw runs. My opponent has to shield this, and once again, the attack-weighted Ground Mole is gonna take the Time King for a ride down here. Does about 70%, maybe 70, 75% of his health there, and my Origin is gonna come in, but at this point, because I farmed down and the Togekiss is way too low, I can take the win there. So again, very interesting to see the Togekiss and Dialga core here. Makes a lot of sense. My opponent just had a different idea for how he was going to counter the Melmetal, but once again, you can see there, Togekiss covering against those fighters, covering against those dragons. What do you see in the back? Weak to dragon, weak to potential fighting, right? So makes a lot of sense there from a team composition standpoint. Okay, so far we've talked about 3 different types of leads. The Dragonite lead, which is not as common, and then 2 common leads, which are going to be Dialga and Togekiss. In this particular case, we'll go into the Giratina Origin leads, which happens to be this opponent here. So the things that I think about when I see a Giratina Origin lead, Giratina Origin, very strong Pokemon against Steel types. Even in this matchup here, despite Excadrill still having access to those stab draw runs, this is still not a great matchup for Excadrill in the long run, especially because the Shadow Claw damage actually does chunk Excadrill quite a bit, and also it can't really take any charge moves. So Giratina Origin can actually take a draw run before needing to shield, whereas Excadrill, you really don't want to take an Ominous Wind if you can. So when I see Giratina Origin, high strength against Steels and high strength against Mewtwo. However, a big weakness to things like Dragon Breath users, to Snorlax. Snorlax is one of the biggest walls to Giratina Origin in Master League, and then Togekiss. So whatever is in the back for my opponent here, I expect at the very least a soft answer to Snorlax, and then probably a hard counter to Dragons and to Togekiss. So Melmetal makes a lot of sense here in terms of pairing, so we'll have to see what else is in the back. I'm expecting there to be at least a Melmetal, so that means that I must win alignment here somehow, and unfortunately the only plan that I have here is that my Excadrill needs to be lined up on the Steel type, and that my Giratina Origin has to stay in against this Giratina Origin here. So this is a really tricky lead. I don't know how I'm going to play this going down the road, because I've had mixed results swapping in my Giratina Origin, but that's my plan right now, is to try to stay in with this Giratina Origin, or you know, if maybe in the future I'll probably stay in with Excadrill just to see what happens. But my opponent's going to get a 1 Shadow Claw lead here, and he's going to force the CMP right as we both hit our Shadow Balls here. So he's 1 Shadow Claw ahead. I'm going to get to a Shadow Ball here, and I have to go for Shadow Ball, because in this particular case, like you saw in the previous matchup that I lost, the Giratina Origin Mirror, if I don't go for Shadow Ball here, I'm not going to be able to take a shield, and I'm not going to be able to punish him because he can just swap out. And I'm definitely going to respect the Giratina Origin now, because I know that he has the ability to bail if he needs to. So go for the Shadow Ball here, and we get an interesting result here. My opponent calls the bait and gets hit with a massive Shadow Ball. And as soon as this happens here, it's a big sigh of relief, right? Because for me, partially I'm thinking, oh, he must have an answer to Giratina Origin, which means there's probably a Dialga in the back. Makes sense to have the Steel as well. However, because he took the Shadow Ball here, it also means that my Excadrill potentially has better matchups down the road. So let's see what happens here. My opponent is going to throw here. This is CMP. I'm not going to make the same mistake I did last time. I'm going to respect this, and I'm going to shield. And it is also a Shadow Ball. So as soon as this happens, my opponent makes a switch here. You can see here at the top right corner, it's a Steel type, and it's 3650 CP, and it's a Melmetal. So this, I actually am kind of shocked at the moment because there's the Melmetal that we expected to come out, but why is my opponent bringing Melmetal into Giratina by choice? This is a terrible matchup for Melmetal. Sure, the Rock Slides can chunk a little bit, but the Rock Slides only do about 30% HP, so he's going to need to land 3 more Rock Slides and I resist Thunder Shocks. So I'm not really sure why my opponent's doing this, but at this point, I can deduce that as long as because I've eliminated this Giratina Origin, my original plan of having to have my Excadrill line up against the Melmetal, it doesn't really apply here anymore. As long as I know that as long as I can preserve this Giratina Origin, that I'm going to be in a great spot. So once again, I'm going to take the first move from Melmetal, which is going to be a Rock Slide. Not a problem at all. And I'm going to fire the Shadow Ball here on the CMP. My opponent has no reason to shield this. My assumption is he was trying to sack, but as we're charging up to the second round of Rock Slides, I noticed that my switch timer is coming up, and at this point I realized that this Giratina is probably going to be my MVP, because if you swap in Melmetal into Giratina Origin, then something in the back is even weaker to that, and if it's weak to Giratina Origin, there might be a good chance that it's also weak to Dragonite. So actually, as I reevaluate this situation in my head, my Excadrill is probably the most expendable Pokemon on this team right now, because if I have a solid answer to the Melmetal, and I have a solid answer to what's potentially in the back, because it does look like it's weak to a Dragon, then that means I can sacrifice my Excadrill here. But not only am I going to sack swap this, I'm going to sack swap this on the Rock Slide. So here, I'm going to catch a move here, fully expecting this to be a Rock Slide and to catch my opponent off guard. And it is. So very fantastic. This is double resisted, I believe. And right now, because we're at energy parity, because my opponent is just throwing five Thunder Shocks of energy and throwing immediately, I'm going to win CMP to the next charge move. And this is going to be a huge tell as to whether my opponent wants to superpower this Excadrill and blow my last shield, or he wants to have whatever's in the back take care of it. So here I'm going to go for the drill run, and my opponent's going to let this go, because at this point I think my opponent realized that even if he took out this Excadrill, still has to deal with the Giratina Origin, and we're going to see what my opponent's last Pokemon is. So here comes in a Psychic type. It's a Mewtwo. Makes complete sense, right? Because here in the original hypothesis we had there was Giratina Origin would need an answer to Snorlax, to Togekiss, to Dragonite, to Dialga, right? And because Melmetal covers a lot of those weaknesses, this generalist in the back as Mewtwo, probably with Focus Blast and Sight Strike, makes a lot of sense in this situation for him to bring in. So my opponent here basically has a 3-shielded Mewtwo. He has 2 shields, and he has a sack swap on Giratina Origin, so it makes a lot of sense that he would put all of his faith into this Pokemon to be able to carry him into the game. So in this particular case, though, I'm in a really good spot because I have a full Pokemon in the back, and I also have Excadrill, which does lose CMP to Mewtwo, but I can survive 1 Sight Strike, and that means that if I want to invest a shield, I can force another one on him. So I can get this down to a 0-shield situation between Dragonite and Giratina Origin plus versus Mewtwo. So shield's the first one. He's going to overfarm a little bit, throw some energy. I'm completely okay with letting this go. Throws a Sight Strike, does a lot of damage, but I'm going to be able to hit the drill run. And here again, he's going to shield. Oh, he's not going to shield this one. And then I'm going to try to throw the drill run here, but he makes the insane catch right there. There goes the 3rd shield from the Giratina Origin. And now he's going to be able to come back. I'm going to swap to my Dragonite instantly, and he's got a lot of energy on this Mewtwo. I'm going to let all of his energy go. I do not care what it is, and I'm going to threaten the farm down with Dragon Breath. And my opponent decides to throw again, and here I can just bring back in the Giratina Origin. Giratina Origin is the MVP once the lead Giratina Origin was removed, and right there you can see the back line. Probably not the best constructed backline, being very weak to a Giratina Origin with energy lead. So me being able to read that, especially him forcibly bringing in his Melmetal, told me that, hey, I need to preserve this Giratina Origin in some way. So here, obviously, Excadrill didn't have a whole lot of use there, but that's okay. Sometimes it's really there just to apply that shield pressure like you saw in that final matchup against Mewtwo. Okay, we're in match 7 of 8, and this is going to be another Giratina Origin lead. So once again, this one's shiny, so it probably does more damage. But once again, see the Giratina origin. Expect there to be answers in the back to the biggest weaknesses to Giratina origin. So some answer to Togekiss, Dialga, other Dragon Breath users, or Snorlax. And I'm gonna once again swap into my own Giratina origin. This is the only plan that I have for this team. And I'm expecting my opponent to swap out here. So here, my opponent swaps in Ho-Oh, which is a little bit spicy, but also makes a lot of sense because Ho-Oh seems to have a pretty decent matchup against Dialga, especially if it's not carrying Thunder. It can go straight Earthquake there in those situations, and it's going to be resisting Iron Head. Obviously, the Dragon Breath damage will be adding up, but it's a pretty solid answer, I think, unless the opponent wants to go down and give you shield advantage. So here, the way I'm going to play this is I'm going to go straight for the Shadow Ball initially because my opponent's more likely to shield if he were to use a Brave Bird to debuff himself. So might as well get the damage here and then try to go for Ominous Winds. If this Shadow Ball can land, then I'll be in a really good spot. So trying my best here not to let a fast move sneak through. So here, I don't get an Incinerate through, which is fantastic. Don't want that Ho to get ahead as much as I already can get ahead with Incinerate. So go straight for the Shadow Ball here, no baiting. Opponent takes it right here. So because my opponent took it right here, that means that the next move that I can fire can just be the Ominous Wind, and I can start pressuring either shields or be able to force switch. So opponent is going to build up some energy here, and a couple of ways that I think that the Ho player can play this. I'm not quite sure about this matchup yet. It's one that I have to learn, but I know that its options are going to be Brave Bird and Earthquake. If it goes Earthquake though, my inclination is that he's not going to be able to get to another Earthquake. So I think my opponent's best play is try to go for double Brave Bird. So I'm expecting this to be one, and I have to take a risk here to see if I survive it. I was kind of in experimental mode as well, so I was expecting a Brave Bird, and I was hoping that I would survive because I am resisting the Incinerates. So here, my opponent is going to go for the Brave Bird. Giratina origin, despite being a little bit squishy, can still survive one, and I'm going to go for the Ominous Wind. So if this is going to happen, that means that my opponent still needs 2 more Incinerates to get to the next Brave Bird, I believe, and on top of that, I can potentially reach another Ominous Wind. So my opponent does let this go because the Ho-Oh is debuffed, and that means that I have 1 switch advantage at this point, and that means that I can align my Dragonite to the Giratina. And the best part about this is because previously what we talked about was Giratina pairing so well with Melmetal, I'm already expecting one in the back. So here my opponent's going to farm down. I'm not going to get to the Ominous Wind, but it's okay because I'm going to be able to bring in my Dragonite. And same plan as last time, except this one has an energy lead, so it's a little bit tricky. So I'm going to bring in my Dragonite, start pressuring it, and once again, I'm going to let whatever move this is go through, expecting the swap out to happen eventually. But you go Shadow Ball here. I'm going to get to the Dragon Claw, I'm going to fire it, and see what my opponent does. So here he decides to shield. So this is really interesting. So when my opponent shielded, I was like, oh man, does he actually have a Melmetal in the back or not? So I wasn't really sure if this meant that my opponent wanted to preserve the Giratina origin to fight against Excadrill, or if it was just because he had a lot of energy. So my opponent's going to throw again. At this point, I need to shield, because my Excadrill would have a hard time trying to get this Giratina origin down from this amount of health. So once again, I'm going to try to farm, and my opponent brings in his last Pokemon, which is the Steel type that we anticipated in the back. So once again, that Giratina and Melmetal core showing itself again. And this is a tricky situation that I actually did not play out correctly once I went back and rewatched this. I should have just waited for the Melmetal to throw the superpower, but instead I go straight Drill Run. So here I'm just gonna, I decided to throw on the Q, and what I should be doing is building up to 2 Drill Runs, so as soon as my opponent uses superpower, I can go ahead and do that. So either way though, opponent's gonna throw here. I'm not gonna shield this because I know that's not gonna KO me for the first time, so I'll go very low, and now I can go for the Drill Run and actually KO him. So what would have happened earlier, I suppose, would be like, if he had used superpower, I could have just KO'd him. He might have let that go, but either way, this is kind of a bad situation for me though, because the Giratina origin is able to come in and farm up a little bit more energy. But because I didn't shield that superpower, I have still retained it here, and I can still be able to block 2 attacks. So here, I just shield up whatever it is, and I'm a little worried about the energy situation, but Dragon Breath does enough by itself before I get to the Dragon Claw. So once again, another common core that I'm probably going to start anticipating a lot more inside of Master League, but I'm able to handle that on the safe spot pretty well, even if his Giratina origin was able to come in and get that energy lead. Okay, and for the final battle of this video, we'll be getting into a Melmetal lead. So these are a lot more common than I'm depicting here, but this is the battle that I found very interesting. So gonna get into this matchup here, and we're gonna be meeting Excadrill into Melmetal. So kind of like the previous matchups that we saw with the Giratina lead in the Melmetal backline, kind of plays out very similarly here. I do want to shield the first superpower so that they can debuff themselves and then threaten the draw run afterwards. And of course, Melmetal, very strong against Togekiss, very strong against Dialga. So I'm definitely expecting there to be weaknesses in the back, probably in the form of dragons. There's the famous 2-0 Butters line that has the Melmetal, Dialga, and Dragonite backline. So that's kind of what I am expecting, something very similar to that. So gonna go ahead and start it here, and usually the Melmetal charges up to 2 superpowers before they decide to use one in Bail, but my opponent here throws on the 8th Mudshot. So at this point, I'm a little bit worried because I know that against the 2-0 Butters line, that Excadrill is going to be the MVP, kind of no matter what. And because my opponent's throwing early here, he must have something else in the back that is not that backline. So I can eliminate the Dragonite and potentially the Dialga, but Dragonite probably a little less common here. And because he's going to Bail, I'm going to assume that he has potentially 2 answers to Excadrill in the back. So here, opponent throws here. I have to shield to respect the superpower, and my opponent does throw superpower, which confirms right now that he's going to swap out. So he does, brings in a Snorlax. And this is what kind of surprised me a little bit. And the spoiler alert here is that, you know, we're running an ABB line where we have a specific game flow or game plan that we want to execute. My opponent here winds up also running an ABB line, and this definitely threw me for a loop here. So he brings a Snorlax here, and I'm like, oh, I have all this energy. I can just soften the Snorlax and then farm all the way down with Dragonite. That's going to wind up being the big mistake in this match. So here, going to get the double draw run off, and my opponent is pretty low. I'm like, okay, I could just bring in the Dragonite, farm all the way down. This is not a big problem. So opponent here throws energy, and this is the only body slam he's going to get to. So I'm just going to farm all the way down. But then I realize, wait, he's got a Melmetal in the back. So this is kind of a rough situation now because I realized that he can load up on energy and he has shield advantage. So I definitely misplayed there. I probably should have just stayed in with the Excadrill. Especially when I see the back Pokemon, I'm definitely going to regret my decision here. So here I think I'm in a decent spot because even if he has all the energy, I can bring in Giratina Origin to meet his Melmetal and invalidate the energy. However, like we said before, if you have a Giratina Origin lead, what is a great Pokemon to complement with it? It's Melmetal. If you have a Melmetal lead, what's a great Pokemon to complement with it? Totally misread this backline. I was expecting dragons in the back, and I guess there was one technically speaking, but what my opponent did, whether it was inadvertent or deliberate, he used the Snorlax there as an ABB to bait out my Dragonite, and now this Giratina with a shield advantage, and you know, down a little bit of energy, but with a 2-to-1 shield advantage plus a loaded Melmetal in the back, and the fact that I can't swap in my Excadrill to take care of this, yeah, we're in a pretty bad spot here. So opponent comes in here, and I have to go for the Omnis Wind because I am behind. So if you can tell from my streams, I don't really bait that often, but in this case, because I was down so much, I did feel like I had to fish for the boost. So I do go for the Ominous Wind in this case, and my opponent's also going to fire a charge move. So in this particular case here, I actually choose not to shield here. I'm going to call my opponent's bait, and the reason that I do is because this is such a dominating position for this trainer. If he were to throw an Ominous Wind and I were to shield it, I would lose on the spot. I'd probably just top left at that point because he could easily escort his Giratina into double Shadow Ball, take both my Mons out in the game. If he throws an Ominous Wind and I don't shield, that's my pathway to victory. I can potentially throw another Ominous Wind, try to get a boost, try to get back in the game. If he throws Shadow Ball here and I don't shield, I lose. If he throws a Shadow Ball and I shield, I still lose because I'm going to still be down 2 to no shields. So I think my opponent, or I'll be down 1 to 0 shields. So I think my opponent was in a very dominating position here. The only win case or win condition here was that this is an Ominous Wind. So I have to make a call here to not shield, and he does Omnis Wind me. So you think everything is okay though, until the boost happens. So this at this point, I think the game is actually over, because my opponent here, I think he probably knows I'm going to go for the Shadow Ball here as a desperate Hail Mary, but it doesn't matter here, right? Because he's got a shield, so I'm going to need a Shadow Ball and an Ominous Wind to take him out, or I need 2 charge moves from Excadrill. So at this point in time, it's a little bit too late, and despite having the Shadow Ball, he's going to no shield this, and it is going to deal basically the same as an Ominous Wind. So I try to swap to my Excadrill last minute to get some damage in. And this Ominous Wind is going to hurt. It does about half my life here. Go for the drill run. My opponent has no reason not to shield here. He can literally just Shadow Claw the rest of my team down. So that's what my opponent does here. I think I get Shadow Claw down. I come in with my own Giratina. I have to shield this now no matter what, but guess what? He's got the Rock Slides loaded in the back with the Melmetal. So unfortunately for me, I didn't follow my own principles. So what I could have done there was just stay in with the Excadrill and fought it out, because seeing the matchups now and seeing how they operated, the best choice for Excadrill was actually just to stay on the Snorlax and have my Origin line up with the Melmetal, have my Dragonite line up on the Giratina Origin. But my opponent, again, like I said, whether it was inadvertent or whether it was intentional, did a very good job of baiting out the Dragonite and being able to play around that, navigate around that in a very smart way. So GG's to my opponent right there. That was a really well played match. I think with or without the boost there, because I have set myself up for such a poor situation, can't put it on the opponent for that, for getting lucky or anything like that. That was just a misplay on my end. Okay, so that'll do it for my first journey into Master League Classic from a player POV. I'll definitely be looking to hone my skills next season regarding how to read team compositions, especially as we enter into more blind formats such as the Great League Remix or the Retro Cup. And as a big thanks to the extended trade distance, as well as all the lucky trades we were able to get from the Valentine's Day event, I will be looking to make more Master Classic content next season. I think we have 3 weeks total or 4 weeks total of that for season 7, so I'm definitely very excited for it. I've got a Dialga waiting, I've got a Ho-Oh waiting, I've got potentially more Pokemon that are coming along the way. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this content, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment or like, and share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video.